This video is produced by Propix Canada Media Limited and True Crime and Justice TV.com. Executive producer James Cousineau. Some segments may have used Propix Media AI technology and in video to assist in production. Picture a land where history whispers from every stone, where ancient empires have risen and fallen, leaving their indelible mark. This is Israel, Palestine, a land steeped in religious and historical significance for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. The very air seems to hum with the weight of centuries, a testament to the countless pilgrims, conquerors, and empires that have traversed its hills and valleys. It's a place where the echoes of empires mingle with the prayers of the faithful, where the past feels eternally present. At the heart of this ancient land lies Jerusalem, a city sacred to three major world religions. Its cobblestone streets have witnessed the footsteps of prophets and kings. Its ancient walls have echoed with the clash of swords and the murmur of prayers. For Jews, it's the site of the first and second temples, a symbol of their covenant with God. For Christians, Jerusalem marks the ground where Jesus walked, preached, and was crucified, a testament to their faith. And for Muslims, it's the place where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven, making it their third holiest city. But this shared reverence for the land, this tapestry woven from three distinct yet intertwined faiths, belies a deeper, more turbulent reality. For beneath the surface of this sacred landscape lies a long and painful history of conflict, a struggle for control over land, resources, and narratives that continues to this day. It's a conflict that has claimed countless lives, displaced generations, and left an indelible scar on the soul of the region. Understanding the Israel-Palestine conflict requires delving into this complex and often contradictory history, a history where faith and politics have long been intertwined, and where the search for peace has often been overshadowed by the shadow of violence. To truly grasp the roots of this conflict, we must embark on a journey through time, tracing the threads of history that have led us to this point. Our story begins in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a period marked by the rise of nationalism, both in Europe and the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire, which had ruled over Palestine for centuries, was in decline, its grip on power weakening. At the same time, a new movement was taking root among the Jewish diaspora in Europe, Zionism. Fueled by centuries of persecution and discrimination, Zionism called for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, a land they considered their ancestral birthright. This burgeoning Zionist movement, however, collided with the aspirations of the Arab population already residing in Palestine. These Arabs, predominantly Muslim with a Christian minority, saw Palestine as their home, their land, and they viewed the influx of Jewish immigrants with growing unease and suspicion. As more and more Jewish immigrants arrived, tensions began to simmer, fueled by competing claims to the land and a growing sense of nationalism on both sides. The British, who had emerged victorious from World War I, gained control over Palestine under a mandate from the League of Nations. Tasked with administering the region and facilitating the establishment of a Jewish homeland, as declared in the Balfour Declaration of 1917, the British soon found themselves caught in the middle of this escalating conflict. Their attempts to balance the competing demands of the Jewish and Arab populations often backfired, further inflaming tensions and setting the stage for future conflict. As the Jewish population grew, so too did the demand for land and resources. Jewish organizations purchased land from absentee landlords, often displacing Arab tenant farmers and fueling further resentment. The stage was set for a clash of ideologies, a struggle for control of a land imbued with deep religious and historical significance for both sides. The seeds of conflict had been sown, and the stage was set for a century of turmoil and bloodshed. The 1920s and 1930s witnessed a surge in Jewish immigration to Palestine, driven by persecution in Europe and the Zionist dream of a homeland. This influx, however, exacerbated existing tensions with the Arab population. Land purchases by Jewish organizations, often from absentee landlords, led to the displacement of Arab tenant farmers, deepening resentment and fueling a sense of injustice. As the Jewish population grew, so too did their economic and political influence, further unsettling the Arab community. The British, caught in the crosshairs of these competing nationalisms, struggled to maintain order. Their policies, often seen as favoring one side over the other, only served to escalate the conflict. The Arabs, feeling increasingly marginalized, viewed the British as complicit in the Zionist project, while many Jews grew frustrated with what they perceived as British limitations on Jewish immigration, particularly in the face of the escalating persecution in Europe. Adding fuel to the fire was the rise of nationalist movements on both sides. Arab nationalism, fueled by a desire for self-determination and an end to foreign rule, gained momentum, uniting Arabs across religious lines in opposition to both British rule and Zionist aspirations. On the Jewish side, Zionist groups, some advocating for peaceful coexistence, others pushing for a more assertive stance in securing land and establishing a Jewish state, found themselves increasingly divided on the best path forward. The confluence of these factors, increased Jewish immigration, Arab displacement, British mismanagement, and rising nationalist sentiments, created a tinderbox atmosphere. Palestine, once a land of shared existence, though far from idyllic, became increasingly polarized, teetering on the brink of widespread violence. The seeds of conflict sown in the decades prior were about to bear bitter fruit. The simmering tensions finally boiled over in 1936, igniting the three-year-long Arab Revolt. Fueled by years of resentment over land loss, displacement, and perceived British favoritism towards Jewish immigration, the revolt saw widespread Arab attacks on Jewish communities, British installations, and infrastructure. The revolt, initially a grassroots uprising, soon morphed into a more organized campaign against British rule and the Zionist enterprise. The British response to the revolt was swift and brutal. They imposed curfews, conducted mass arrests, and demolished homes suspected of harboring rebels. Jewish paramilitary groups, some armed and trained by the British, were also mobilized to defend Jewish settlements, further escalating the violence. The revolt left a deep scar on both sides, claiming thousands of lives and further deepening the divide between Arabs and Jews. The 1936-39 Arab Revolt marked a turning point in the conflict. It shattered any remaining illusions of peaceful coexistence, replacing it with a deep-seated mistrust and animosity. The revolt also exposed the limitations of British power and resolve to impose a solution, setting the stage for their eventual withdrawal from Palestine. In the aftermath of the revolt, the conflict entered a new, even more volatile phase, as both sides began to prepare for the possibility of a full-scale war. The violence of the revolt had a profound impact on the psyche of both populations. For the Jewish community, it reinforced the belief in the necessity of a Jewish state, a safe haven from persecution and violence. For the Arab population, it solidified their determination to resist what they perceived as a colonial enterprise aimed at dispossessing them of their land and national aspirations. The revolt, while ultimately quelled, left a legacy of
Everybody is looking for confidence on the road. Here's how you get it. Dive into driving with the best at your side. At The Driving Coach, we offer top-notch, fully licensed driving lessons tailored to make you a road pro. Whether you're a beginner or brushing up your skills, we've got you covered. Certified, insured, and with a passion for teaching, our instructors are here to guide you through every turn. Don't wait. Book your driving lesson today. Call us at 604-354-1742 or visit www.thedrivingcoach.ca. Drive safe, drive smart, drive with us.
Bitterness and bloodshed, casting a long shadow over any future attempts at reconciliation. Section 3. Partition and Exodus, A Land Divided, 1947-48. In the aftermath of World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, international pressure mounted for a solution to the Palestine question. The British, weary of their thankless task and facing increasing violence, announced their intention to withdraw from Palestine. The matter was then referred to the newly formed United Nations, which, in 1947, proposed the infamous Partition Plan. The UN Partition Plan sought to divide Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab, with Jerusalem designated as an international zone. The plan, while intended to appease both sides, satisfied neither. The Jewish leadership, though accepting the plan as a necessary compromise, lamented the loss of a unified homeland and the division of Jerusalem. The Arab leadership, however, vehemently rejected the plan, viewing it as a blatant injustice, depriving them of their rightful homeland and rewarding the Zionist movement with land they felt was rightfully theirs. The rejection of the partition plan by the Arab leadership had immediate and tragic consequences. Violence erupted between Arab and Jewish communities, escalating into a full-blown civil war even before the British had completed their withdrawal. Amidst the chaos and bloodshed, a mass exodus of Palestinians began. Driven by fear, intimidation, and in some cases expulsion by Jewish militias, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fled their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring Arab countries. The partition of Palestine, intended to resolve the conflict, instead ignited a new and even more brutal chapter in the struggle for control of the land. The mass displacement of Palestinians during this period, known as the Nakba, catastrophe in Arabic, would have long-lasting consequences, shaping the narrative of the conflict for generations to come and becoming a deeply ingrained source of grievance and trauma for the Palestinian people. Section 4, the War of 1948, Birth of a Nation, Displacement of a People. On May 14, 1948, as the last British troops sailed away, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The declaration, met with jubilation by Jews worldwide, was the culmination of a centuries-long dream of a Jewish homeland. However, this joy was juxtaposed with the immense suffering and displacement experienced by the Palestinian people. The declaration of Israeli independence triggered a full-scale war, with neighboring Arab states joining the fray in support of the Palestinian Arabs. The war, a brutal and chaotic affair, saw fierce fighting between the fledgling Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, and the combined Arab armies. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the IDF, bolstered by an influx of foreign volunteers and driven by a fierce determination to defend their newly won independence, proved victorious. The war ended in 1949 with the signing of armistice agreements, but not before redrawing the map of the region. Israel, victorious on the battlefield, controlled significantly more territory than allocated under the UN partition plan. Jordan annexed the West Bank and East Jerusalem, while Egypt took control of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Arabs, meanwhile, found themselves dispossessed and dispersed, with no state of their own and their dream of an independent Palestine shattered. The 1948 war, a pivotal event in the history of the conflict, had profound and long-lasting consequences. It led to the creation of the State of Israel, but it also resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, creating a refugee crisis that continues to this day. The war also solidified the cycle of violence and mistrust between Israelis and Palestinians, setting the stage for future conflicts and perpetuating the cycle of displacement, suffering, and animosity. Section 5. Aftermath and Exodus, Scars of Conflict, Seeds of Future Strife. The 1948 war left deep scars on the region, physically and emotionally. The newly established State of Israel, though victorious, remained surrounded by hostile neighbors and grappling with the complexities of integrating a wave of Jewish immigrants from across the globe. The Palestinian people, meanwhile, faced a profound sense of loss and dispossession. Hundreds of thousands remained refugees, scattered across the Middle East, their dreams of a homeland shattered. The war had a profound impact on the demographics of the region. The Palestinian exodus, which began during the Civil War and intensified during the 1948 war, resulted in the depopulation of hundreds of Palestinian villages and towns. Many of these were subsequently destroyed or repopulated by Jewish immigrants, erasing the physical presence of Palestinians from the landscape and further fueling Palestinian resentment and claims of ethnic cleansing. The aftermath of the war also saw the emergence of the Palestinian refugee problem, a humanitarian crisis that continues to this day. The refugees living in overcrowded camps in neighboring countries faced poverty, discrimination, and a lack of basic services. Their plight became a rallying cry for Arab nationalism and a source of ongoing tension in the region. The denial of their right to return to their homes in what became Israel remains a major sticking point in any peace negotiations. The 1948 war, while marking the end of one chapter in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, sowed the seeds for future conflicts. It created a legacy of displacement, resentment, and animosity that continues to haunt the region. The unresolved issues of borders, refugees, settlements, and the status of Jerusalem would continue to fuel tensions, leading to further wars and perpetuating a cycle of violence and mistrust that continues to this day. Shifting sands of power, the Suez Crisis, and the rise of Arab nationalism. The 1950s and 1960s witnessed the rise of Arab nationalism, a powerful force that sought to unite the Arab world, liberate it from foreign influence, and reclaim its rightful place on the world stage. At the forefront of this movement stood Gamal Abdel Nasser, the charismatic president of Egypt, who nationalized the Suez Canal in 1956, challenging Western dominance and igniting the Suez Crisis. The Suez Crisis, a pivotal moment in the Cold War, pitted Egypt against Israel, Britain, and France. While the crisis itself was short-lived, its repercussions were profound. Nasser, though militarily defeated, emerged from the crisis a hero in the Arab world, his defiance of the West resonating with millions yearning for independence and self-determination. The crisis also had a significant impact on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It strengthened the perception of Israel as a Western outpost in a hostile region, further alienating it from its Arab neighbors. The war, while a military victory for Israel, did little to address the underlying issues fueling the conflict. The Palestinian refugee problem remained unresolved, and the occupation of Palestinian territories captured during the war only served to deepen Arab resentment and sow the seeds for future conflicts. The rise of Arab nationalism, embodied by Nasser's defiance, had a profound impact on the Palestinian national movement. It provided inspiration, support, and a sense of shared destiny, laying the groundwork for the emergence of Palestinian resistance organizations such as the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, dedicated to the liberation of Palestine and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state.
What I wish I knew when I was relocating? That finding the right movers doesn't have to be a hassle with Carry Movers. Whether you're shifting your home or your business, Carry Movers has got you covered in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valleys. Family owned for over 20 years, these guys bring experience and a personal touch to every move. From packing to lifting, your belongings are in safe hands. And no matter the distance, local, provincial, or national, Carry Movers makes your transition smooth and stress-free. Ready to make a move? Call 604-687-1746 or visit www.carrymovers.com. A proud A+ member of the Better Business Bureau. Let's get moving.
6 days of war, decades of occupation. The 1967 war and its aftermath. In June 1967, tensions between Israel and its Arab neighbors reached a boiling point, culminating in the Six-Day War. Fearing an imminent attack, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, quickly overwhelming their forces and achieving a stunning military victory. The war, a watershed moment in the conflict, resulted in Israel's capture of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, and the Sinai Peninsula. Overnight, Israel had transformed itself from a small, vulnerable state into a regional power, controlling territories inhabited by over 1 million Palestinians. The 1967 war had far-reaching consequences. It led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, further exacerbating the refugee problem. It also marked the beginning of Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, an occupation that continues to this day. The war also had a profound psychological impact on both sides. For Israelis, it reinforced their sense of vulnerability and the belief in the need for a strong military, while for Palestinians, it cemented their sense of dispossession and the urgency of their struggle for self-determination. The war also led to the emergence of the Israeli settlement movement, a highly controversial issue that remains a major obstacle to peace. Encouraged by successive Israeli governments, Jewish settlers began to establish communities in the occupied territories, claiming a biblical right to the land. The growth of these settlements, considered illegal under international law, has dramatically altered the demographics of the West Bank, further complicating any future peace agreement and fueling Palestinian accusations of land confiscation and colonization. From despair to hope, the First Intifada and the Oslo Accords. The 1980s witnessed a turning point in the Palestinian struggle for self-determination with the outbreak of the First Intifada, uprising, in 1987. The Intifada, a largely non-violent popular uprising against Israeli occupation, captured the world's attention and shifted international sympathy towards the Palestinian cause. The Intifada, characterized by demonstrations, boycotts, and civil disobedience, challenged the Israeli narrative of security and control, exposing the human cost of occupation. It also demonstrated the determination of the Palestinian people to resist occupation and their yearning for freedom and self-determination. The Intifada, while ultimately suppressed by Israeli forces, had a profound impact on the political landscape. It forced Israel to recognize the PLO as a legitimate representative of the Palestinian people and paved the way for the Oslo Accords, a series of agreements signed in the 1990s that aimed to resolve the conflict through a two-state solution. The Oslo Accords, while hailed as a historic breakthrough, ultimately failed to deliver on their promise of peace. The Accords, riddled with ambiguities and loopholes, failed to address key issues such as the status of Jerusalem, the fate of Palestinian refugees, and the dismantling of Israeli settlements. The continued expansion of settlements, coupled with ongoing violence and mistrust, undermined the peace process, leading to its eventual collapse. Shattered hopes indeed marked the era of the Second Intifada and the collapse of the peace process. The failure of the Oslo Accords, coupled with the provocative visit of Ariel Sharon, then leader of the Israeli opposition, to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, ignited this violent uprising in 2000. Unlike the first, the Second Intifada was characterized by a significant escalation in violence, including harrowing suicide bombings by Palestinian militants and targeted assassinations by Israeli forces. Driven by years of frustration, anger, and disillusionment, this intifada resulted in the tragic deaths of thousands of Palestinians and Israelis, further deepening the cycle of violence and mistrust. The impact was devastating on both societies, leading to the construction of the separation barrier by Israel, a physical and psychological divide that further severed Israeli and Palestinian relations. Additionally, the intifada witnessed the rise of Hamas in Gaza, adding a complex new layer to the conflict. Ultimately, the Second Intifada marked the end of the Oslo peace process and ushered in a period of heightened tensions and mistrust. Although quelled by Israeli military force, it left behind a legacy of bitterness, trauma, and shattered hopes for a peaceful resolution. Following the Second Intifada, there was a noticeable hardening of positions on both sides, rendering the Israeli-Palestinian conflict seemingly more intractable than ever. The construction of the separation barrier, the expansion of Israeli settlements, and the continued occupation of Palestinian territories fueled Palestinian anger and resentment. Presented by Israel as a security measure to prevent terrorist attacks, the separation barrier is viewed by Palestinians as a land grab and a vivid symbol of their confinement and isolation. This barrier, slicing through Palestinian land, has separated farmers from their fields, families from one another, and communities from their livelihoods, deepening the sense of despair and hopelessness. Furthermore, the continued expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, deemed illegal under international law, severely undermines the possibility of a two-state solution. These settlements, now home to hundreds of thousands of Israeli citizens, have fragmented the West Bank, making it increasingly difficult to envision a contiguous and viable Palestinian state. The ongoing occupation, now extending into its sixth decade, has devastated Palestinian society, hindering economic development, eroding social structures, and fueling a deep sense of injustice and resentment. With no political horizon in sight and the daily humiliations of occupation, a pervasive sense of despair and hopelessness, particularly among Palestinian youth, has taken root.